Hello, wonderful people. Baldur's Gate, exceptional game, amazing. But also, it can be very dangerous to be misunderstood because they did some things there that are not really good idea to copy it. So let's see if we can treat Baldur's Gate 3 as like a typical PC narrative RPG game blueprint, and how following it, any smaller studio, small project can just, die from trying to, follow the same path. Basically, I've been in games for more than 25 years, and I started exactly like this. Reviewing games, playing games. It was a really nice time. I was getting paid to play games all day long. And since then, I've entered the industry as a game designer, then producer, then game director, and now I'm a narrative designer. In this video, I will explain why Baldur's Gate 3 works, it works, but also why we won't have too many games like this, and why it's not a good idea to say, oh, let's make Baldur's Gate 3 inspired whatever. So, what Baldur's Gate 3 actually optimizes for is replayability, while not really disregarding, but like preferring it over narrative coherence. Also, they want to have like so many, content, and they could produce it, obviously. So it's like not really streamlined for thematic sharpness. And I always preach like theme. So they don't exactly do that. And then also they want to give a lot of not just agency, but like focus on players' choices as the way to for players to express themselves, rather than like crafting a story with strong authorial like intent, and it's not a flaw. It's simply business decision and a design choice that follows. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that Larian wasn't just making a story to tell. Larian is not like a game designer, turned digital. They were trying to reduce something becoming highly undesirable in PC games, which is consumability. Okay, pause. Games, as we see in mobile space, can be service, like perpetual live ops, constantly some content, or there could be consumables like PC games. You play, you reach the end, you win, that's it. You can delete it forever from your library. And studios would like to have you go back to their game, play it one more time, for several reasons. First of all, it justifies the high price, so you don't just get like fixed hours of entertainment, but kind of squeeze some more. And also they can sell you some more content, like, okay, you didn't like play and forget, but like you return to it a few times, and now we have more content, and then you kind of stay in. So to reduce this quality of their game being consumable, they heavily rely on branching, like multiple endings, radically different party compositions, story arcs that are affected by these radically different party compositions, original characters kind of dare to be opposed to players' totally custom characters, and then these custom characters kind of also kind of influences the interactions in the story. And they of course rely on some sort of like mutually exclusive quest resolutions. And all of this was not never seen before. Actually, we see it from the early days of role-playing games. I'm not talking like 90s and the gold box guys, I am that old. I'm talking about like Mass Effect and Dragon Age, and of course previous games in that group, like Jade Empire, for example. So all of this is to boost the perceived value of the product they try to sell you. It extends kind of cultural lifespan. Nothing better could happen to a game than become a meme and like a cult and like a household name, and like everyone's buzzing about it. So that's what they wanted, because it means infinitely more money for them, and of course to justify the AAA price point, which fairly deserved in Baldur's Gate 3's case. So this approach of having like huge world, huge cast of characters, different combinations, branching, mutually exclusive quest lines or arcs, only works if you have a massive budget, have a long development cycle, have systemic narrative tools, and of course large player base willing to not only play 80 to 100 hour game, but like replay it constantly. There is also a big misconception that I want to address. So like we're taking a little detour here. But generally, when it comes to crafting role-playing games, and I know a lot of you who would like to work on a role-playing game, one illusion or misconception is that many choices and many branches deepen the theme. Not necessarily true. They kind of recontextualize the content and doesn't necessarily, transform it. The important thing when you're crafting your RPG game is to understand why would you want to have this kind of diverging, branching, arcs. Sometimes you want to, validate different playstyles, and basically then you craft several personas of your player's character, which is actually a good idea for a team. I spoke once on the conference about like how to craft specifically, player's character. Also, let's not forget that Baldur's Gate is like a Dungeons and Dragons thing, and if you don't include all the archetypes, then you kind of, miss the point of the beauty of Dungeons and Dragons, which has all these different, warlocks and clerics and sorcerers and monks, and each has their own flavor, which reflects both on PC, player character, and the NPCs, obviously. But also you want to, give this, not illusion, but an impression, actually, that you're not locked out, that you have, many options. So freedom of the player here is not philosophical, it's like experiential thing, it's actual thing. Then, of course, they do this clever bit of systemic storytelling where companions are not just, who's the best in fight or who has the best spells or whatever. It's like a narrative multiplicator. It's a narrative force, because companions become these little modular narrative engines, almost as if you're like picking your particular composition of story arcs you want into your game. Swap the party, everything changes. Not only the tone, but also moral framing, frictions, whatever. And it's really nice and all cool and fine, but there's a trade-off. So dialogue density, or like, this tone shift kind of comes in place of narrative focus. So you cannot be really like delivering a laser focused message if you go down this road. And don't get me wrong, in an epic scale game like Baldur's Gate 3, they can pull it off because they have a lot of narrative space. But how many of you plan to make Baldur's Gate 3, size game? Not only in like hours of play, but like production things? I don't think so. And even if you do, you have to carefully consider your narrative spaces. How much time do you have? In a poem, you have to do it like this. One flash. Everything needs to be clear from, as few words as possible. If you have a short story, you have time for a slice, treat a short story like a slice, pie slice. Like it contains quality of the whole, and that's what makes a short story good, by the way, or a short game. But only if you have like a full, large volume, you can have enough narrative space to kind of do everything you want. It's like, firing up a big fire for the big grill. If you want to, barbecue like gazillion burgers, you need a, big fire. Also, with this party composition as a narrative device, it kind of helps you as a player customize the story, and then story adapts to your choices, which is amazing. But it can lead to a lot of parts of the game which players may never explore and may never see, may never go to. In a big game like Baldur's Gate 3, they want to make sure you come back and explore all these, this cannot be done in a 1, 2, or 5 playthroughs. But if you're normal studio or indie studio or, single developer, any content that player doesn't get to experience is potentially, a huge cost with dubious benefits. So beware. Okay, something that kind of plagues this approach is the endings, because you obviously will have, many different endings, many different possibilities. And there's always going to be a question like which one's canonical. And it can hurt a game, as we have seen in, I think, Mass Effect 3, where playthrough is about one thing and then ending is about totally something different, and kind of, the story breaks there and your players are not happy with how the things are resulting. And then even worse is when studio picks which ending is canonical, blah blah. So many endings doesn't always mean strong ending. Quite the contrary, many endings leads the possibility that one of the endings will be quite weak. So why the ending is important? Because endings are like closure, but they turn it in kind of like a replayability incentive. Like, this was the ending, like, go back, play again. So few endings reframe the journey, and mostly the ending, which is not unsatisfying, I must say, they kind of summarize the consequences, like this is what happened, this is what what will happen, like in the end of Dragon Age, I think 1. But like ending also should be very delicate time. It's a place where like the full meaning of the story comes to bear. Best example comes from totally non-narrative game, a Journey, where like the guys worked 1 year to like nail the emotions, right for the ending of that game. So it's intentional on the part of Larian, and not like just lazy writing or whatever. So, or whoever made all this kind of games. So beware of that. Sometimes like in Jade Empire, for example, just before the ending is a bottleneck, and then player can kind of save there and then explore different endings. Not sure if it's the best solution if they wanted this kind of replayability to happen. But also that's like always a big philosophical question. Do you make your player go through entire game again, which Baldur's Gate 3 kind of favors, or you take them through the story, which is super long and super exciting, but then like have them explore different endings from some point on. You don't have to just start from the beginning, and like if you didn't talk to this NPC, then bad ending happens. So all cool, very great solutions they did there, but should it be the standard for role-playing games? I think not, definitely not, because overbranching, let's call it overbranching, like having so many branching arcs, it can lead in a smaller teams with a smaller budget and smaller development cycle to a lot of wasted production, a lot of wasted effort. Also, massive chunks of content potentially will never be seen by a player. Also, there is no way that this kind of diluted, dispersed narrative can be as focused, as like dedicated, focused story arcs. It's simply have to say, you win some, you lose some, treat it like that. Of course, on the production side, it's like super increased, difficulty for QA. There's a lot of, narrative depth. Like, did you actually, make sure that all the branches that converge can actually properly converge? There are some mismatches, which is not like the most difficult thing to fix, but again, smaller team, smaller budget, shorter time could easily happen. So, and of course, let's not forget that in AAA studios, writing is never done by just one man. There's always a team, and there's always like a high level concept and pre-production and production and whatever. So for teams that don't have like big force of writers, like Kingdom Come Deliverance, first thing they did, hire 10 writers. Of course their story is great. Of course it's gonna be super amazing, because they have a lot of people in the team. So for most studios, if you follow this kind of Larian's path, you could easily like lose coherence, lose the tone of voice of the story, lose the engine of the story and the theme, and simply put, more choices, more options does not make for a better story. Baldur's Gate 3 can get away with it. First of all, they had their own existing engine. They didn't have to do two things at the same time. They kind of had their own technological solutions fixed. Of course, they make amazing games outside of Dungeons and Dragons, so they have deep systemic expertise, financial safety in the sense that they don't have to beg investors for just a little bit more cash, and they already have like a following, an audience which kind of lacks this sort of content. So they could basically afford redundancy, reactivity, and they can afford to make a big spectacle instead of keeping tight game design and narrative design together. And most studios simply can't do this and shouldn't even try. So the real lesson to take from Baldur's Gate 3 is don't branch everything. Not every story, especially in the RPG genre, should be heavily branched. I'm not saying don't branch your dialogues and story quests. I'm talking like pay attention to players' intent, pay attention to your story's needs, support roleplay with mechanics whenever you can, ensure that all the choices are somehow acknowledged feedback by the game. And kind of do we go deep or we go wide is one of the important decisions that should be made in pre-production, and not just aim for both, because you might lose both. So basically, Baldur's Gate 3, as you guys know, is like a luxury role-playing game PC experience. It solves a very specific problem, like how can you make a huge expensive game feel replayable? And they made, people are playing, they're having, endless runs with slightly different this or slightly different that. But it is not an answer to a universal question: how do we make good RPG game? If you have, great conditions to make a great game, fine. But imitation, generally, super to be avoided in a world of games. Yet still, everyone does it. But don't copy what's elephant doing. Pick something appropriate for your own size. Not like, oh, it's not for you. Oh, be bold, be brave, I say. But like, have in mind, why are they doing the thing they're doing, Can you afford to, follow them down this path? So yeah, Baldur's Gate 3, great game. I don't know, I generally, I honestly don't enjoy it. I generally don't have time to endlessly replay a game unless it's 4x paint them up thing. I can replay those endlessly, but like I invest like so much in every choice, in every arc, and kind of emotionally drains me. But I'll surely give Baldur's Gate 3 one more go. But yeah, have this in mind. Big branching. Basically, you could end up having like two thematically totally different stories. Again, not bad if you pull it off, but could be very challenging for your players. And unless you have like specific need, like they did, to build it that way. But essentially, this is a calling for all of you to stop playing games like consumers and start playing games as narrative designers and writers, and analyze what solutions did a game apply and why. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye.